Chapter 54. There was sun outside, it was very gold, too gold, artificially gold, electricity and glass that was next to magic, designed to make them forget they were essentially trapped indoors. The perfect weather for potted plants, maybe, but for people.
Hey, you're looking pretty beat. Look lively, or the military'll stop by and weaponize that charming smile of yours.
It was supposed to be a joke, but this... What was his name, Curtis? Maybe Curtis. He wouldn't let up, he always stopped by and tried to talk to her, and she knew the reasons why well enough. They had some manner of joke going on at her expense. She didn't pay enough attention to know what, precisely, was so funny, but... She didn't smile, so maybe that was part of the joke.
Curtis, right? Is there any reason you're here? A few of us were thinking of running a tontine to see how long we last. Maybe have a few drinks, discuss our odds. You're welcome to join in, if you want.
That was unexpected, and the offer sounded genuine. A tontine was hardly a sound investment, and it's not like anyone had anything meaningful to gamble left, anyway. But drinks, Rubbing the circles under her eyes, she managed a curt nod, and perhaps even something along the lines of right or I'll be along. It was hard to remember what she had said, if she had said anything at all. The complex was made of the same standard materials as anywhere else, but surprisingly roomy, the hallmarks of corporate excess forced to adapt to prefabrication and alloy rationing. Inflatable hab complexes no different than the ones used by the military and civilians, stretched on as far as the eye could see, shoulder to shoulder and flapping in the industrial light. Speakers above played calming loops of birdsong, though they hadn't worked right for some time and the birds had begun to layer over one another, creating something that had been extremely amusing at first, and quickly becoming a grating, chirping hell of sound. It was kind of admirable in its ruin, at least. Water coolers always manage to attract conversation not because people need water, though they do, but because even in the face of death, people need to know that someone is doing worse than they are, or so she told herself. It was yet another reason why she stuck to her work and avoided socializing. There was nothing here she particularly wanted to say or hear, and yet... here she was. Fellow employees stared up and past her as she approached, the carefully measured glances of people who don't want to risk getting too close to one another in case.
What are we gambling on?
Lives, as it turned out. The bet was amusing, so she took it, and then took a few swigs, for they had no shot glasses, and had to pass the bottle around, and let her guard down, just a little. For some reason, everyone could agree that the idea of the impending death of humanity, at least their corner of it, for who knew how the rest of the world fared. It was here that Koza found herself, ruddy-faced and smiling but completely aware that she was dreaming. Time, and her indistinguishable co-workers, slowed down and then paused entirely, and Koza whistled to herself, unable to keep a smug smile from flitting up onto her face.
Neato. Heh, I wonder if...
Curtis, that couldn't be his name, it was probably Bevan or something sensible like that, didn't even fall back as she struck his face. Not with any malice, she assured her psyche. Just curiosity. And it was a curious thing indeed how his face turned grey, splattered like improperly prepared dough, and leaked into the background. She repeated the experiment a few times with the others around her, then shut her eyes and tried to imagine what might be the cause of that, and of course, when she blinked, they had returned to where they were sitting, none the wiser. Having emptied the bottle several times over, she replaced it where she had found it, in Curtis Bevan's hands, and tried to let things return to their natural progression. Strangely, however, they didn't, not exactly, at least. The lights flickered, then exploded above, and she felt certain that hadn't happened before. Then the roof of the building went off and...
Hey, Boleslava! Why are you peering down on my dreams?
Boleslava looked surprised, and half floated half jumped back, her giant pink noggin exceptionally cute, exceptionally surprised, and exceptionally confused. Confused and surprised, that was. Koza yawned, and rubbed the circles under her eyes. Some things never changed. Hadn't she needed glasses, though? Her fingers fumbled for them in some long unchecked jacket pocket, but none greeted her grasping hands, if ever they had been present.
Well, it's probably nothing, but, morning. Ah, the weather here is so much nicer than the weather back home.
She had fallen asleep against a particularly nice tree. The bark was green, but peeled back and turned a deep chestnut brown underneath, making it look as if the tree itself were grated and fading up into the sky. Boleslava, who had nestled in one of the branches, after rooting herself carefully with twine and a sleeping hat made with a bit less care than her winter gear, had lowered herself down and was looking around, curiously.
You seem really unsad today. Is everything okay? Ho ho. A peculiar way of saying things all yup, I'm actually better than okay. I feel like I miss out a lot, having to sleep as I do. Sleep is important, even when you want to put it off, it just has ways of finding you when you least expect it. Like cats and jam, or russets and molasses.
Replied Boleslava animatedly. She wasn't sure that those were things that really stuck together, but communicating with Koza meant jarring her out of torpor, because sometimes it seemed like her companion was too prone to staying stuck in dreams, and that didn't help either of them. Today though. Yawning, Koza smiled up widely at the sky. It was especially pleasant, today. The smell of ozone was calming, that tinny scent, tangy and metallic.
Do you want some breakfast or something? I figured today, I'd treat you to something pretty amazing, aha. Sort of, well, since I suppose it's only going to be a year from now, just a little, kind of a thank you for putting up with me so far.
Neither said anything, for both Boleslava and Koza had much to think about.
That sounds lovely. What did you have in mind?
Soon, the two had built a roaring fire, even if Boleslava's help had been limited to mostly staring intently at the fire and hoping that the fire in her eyes might spontaneously cause the drying wood to burst into flames. It took quite some time. The rains had ceased some time ago, but the days danced between uneasy, dew-kissed fogs and pollen-heavy clouds of dust that seemed to exist only to wallow against the trees and get stuck in spider webs. And though they had no molasses,
I'm fairly sure I can recognize a safe potato when I see one, mysterious island or no. If I go under, make sure to build me an incredible tomb. Ahaha.
Boleslava made a face to indicate that it wasn't funny, but neither of them felt particularly frightened. After all, it was a beautiful day, and after digging around in the soil until their hands were both pale, or pink, and coated in dirts, they had found some potatoes and a few worms that seemed content to wriggle back into the soil, lazily. Koza chomped on the potato. The skin had shuffled from a mottled blue to a dark and glossy blue-black, and the insides were extremely sweet. It didn't taste like anything she had had before, even before things had devolved to the situation back home, where she gulped, and silently stared into the distance.
Are you poisoned? No. I've failed you.
The two laughed the moment that she snapped back to attention, but Koza couldn't shake the thoughts she had had. Even after they had eaten their fill, or perhaps because of it.
Did I tell you much about home? I don't mean the time those kids are used to, I mean before that. Not that I remember everything, of course, but sometimes a half-remembered half-truth is important, too, right?
Except she could remember so much, now, the important things, at least.
A bit, but I'm always willing to listen. I don't really want to hike around the countryside, today. The skies are.
Boleslava eyed the heavens above, and with how tiny she was, she looked ridiculously cute, but Koza did as well, because they had seen him. Of course, it was hard not to notice the great dragon's presence, even when he did little to the land below.
Yeah. Me too. Can't say I envy whatever fills somebody with that much rage, but that's why I'm lucky I've got my very own best friend and helpful problem fixer-upper.
Koza leaned over and embraced Boleslava tightly, and the tiny being took some time to mix flowers and burnt potato ashes on her hair. They both felt very proud of themselves, though perhaps for different reasons.
So, well, how do I say this? I remember when I was about as young as those kids were when they came here. Maybe a bit younger. We had actual forest like this, not much of it, but it was there. And it was all internal and kept public, kind of a way to keep our mind off things.
Boleslava couldn't really see it, but from the excited tone in Koza's voice, it had meant something to the older woman, something perhaps she couldn't convey to anyone who hadn't been there, and perhaps that meant that the memory was entirely her own, now, and perhaps none other would know it.
There was this guy I kind of fancied, real cute, decent personality, and I remember we had scheduled some time to walk through the arboretum. I had all sorts of millipedes in my gut. Do you mean butterflies? In your stomach? Millipedes. They've got a million legs.
Koza frowned, eyebrows thick and knit in determination.
You can't tell me that one makes any less sense than the other, and anyway, they've got a million legs. 8 lets is pretty great, so a million is just duck it. But I don't think they actually have a million legs. Maybe they have hundreds, but a million is too much.
Boleslava knew this was where the line was supposed to be drawn, but unfortunately, she was very small and despite her attempts to draw an actual line in the dirt, Koza simply, unintentionally, paced over it.
Anyway, I was nervous, and spent the night there camped out by myself, kind of hoping that I'd do something surprising, even though it was inside. Rain was just a sprinkler system and it was so small compared to this. I liked resting under the trees then, too.
Now that the sun had risen fully, Boleslava decided that the line didn't matter so much. Days like this were the best part of the season, not just because of the light itself but of what it heralded, that better days might come, and even when the light faded and those days faded.
Well, I had gathered my thoughts together, felt confident. Maybe even a little invulnerable. Aha, ha. Saw him walking in the next day, gathered up my courage, a military exercise botched its timing conflicts, and one of their scrappy tanks rolled right over him.
Boleslava knew she had had a thought, but it seemed to have left her mind.
Here.
Koza was laughing, and she didn't seem depressed about it.
It was a long time ago, and I mean, for a certain value of things, I still find it kind of funny. And sad, but, we never really knew each other, and it wasn't intentional. It was just another example of how bad things were there, no one knew what they were doing, and even when we had enough land to try to make a peaceful place away from everything else.
She kept laughing, and there it was. Koza wasn't the kind to get depressed by the things Boleslava was used to. The thought in question was small and quiet and persistent, and now it was gone.
Oh, thanks. Probably didn't need that one, anyhow. Well, the reason we were talking about this, though, that I wanted to. Well.
First, Koza scratched her chin, and then she smiled an uneven and toothy smile.
Messing things up is a time-honored tradition back home. All things considered, I think it's amazing that we 5 didn't completely destroy everything here. I mean, there's still a year left, but...
Boleslava watched the grin flex and twist. Humans were strange, they smiled when they were uneasy or unhappy or angry, and sometimes they were happy when they were frowning, or grimacing, or otherwise peculiar. Koza was different enough than most humans, but that didn't necessarily make it easy to read her, even if...
It wasn't too long after that somebody set fire to the arboretum. The military wrote it up as an act of vandalism, and maybe it was, or maybe it was an act of protest, but honestly, I don't think there was any greater purpose. It just happened like all things happen, they just happen.
Embers flickered in the ashes of their makeshift fire, but the fire itself hadn't kept well. Boleslava wasn't sure why, exactly, but it seemed like the air was thinner as of late, and maybe the fire itself just couldn't breathe. Koza placed her hand gently against Boleslava, and sighed.
This is the sort of place that, if I had been younger, I'd probably have been too shocked to fully appreciate it. And now that I'm here, well, you appreciate it a little too much. Aha! Sharp as always, detective. Maybe we should trek back and see if that little group'd be interested in having a mystery soiree or something like that. Sounds fun, doesn't it? Mysteries are never end quite as satisfyingly as you would like. So much investment, and then the end just leaves you feeling disappointed and tired.
Blue opined, and Boleslava fell backward, fortunate that her perfectly spherical form allowed her to land on her feet after doing a painless and impressive cartwheel. Koza, however, was unsurprised, acting as if he had always been present.
Are you kidding? You're always one step ahead of the culprit and the detective, and then you get to see someone get punished, pat yourself on the back, and say, "Oh, would you like a potato?"
Despite looking nonplussed about the dubious tubers, Blue politely accepted and looked pleased and perhaps even a little surprised with their resulting edibility, though not so much that he talked with an open mouth, of course. Koza made a note to herself not to do the same, then promptly made a note to forget about it.
Not too bad. I'd trade you for some fish I'd caught, but I'm afraid I'm an awfully poor fisherman. It appears I scared all the little fish away.
Boleslava steadied herself, and looked straight up at Blue. Despite everything else, he looked very content right now, perhaps simply glad to be away from whatever it was that he did, and perhaps simply glad that his second potato hadn't collapsed into so much charred and overbaked vegetable matter.
So, you didn't do it, then? Oh, I thought about it. Seemed like following those two would have been a lovely way to find old man Leo, and it would have been fun. But, you mentioned it would be a bad idea, and I've already ignored advice from you in the past. Weighed my options figured.
Boleslava craned to hear what was said as Koza snickered and leaned forward, the older woman's voice a low whisper.
I guess I put my own happiness above justice for the rest of them. You must think I'm a pretty horrible person. Maybe.
Boleslava harumphed quietly to herself, for that wasn't how anyone should reply to a serious question like that, even though Koza seemed to find Blue highly amusing, as ever. It wasn't truly her business, and Koza seemed less prone to depressing thoughts when he was around, but...
Sorry. But it's really a secret. Mostly I'm just glad that you avoided getting your hands dirty. Life is too short to shorten lives, especially when there's always a better way. Excuse me.
Boleslava began, but her words were drowned out by their laughter. It seemed that something was incredibly funny, to both of them. Not that it wasn't humorous to her, as well, but Boleslava was very cautious about laughing too much and floating away to distant shores.
Sorry, I couldn't help myself. Please, is there anything I can be of service with, Mississippi?
Blue fell into a truly elaborate bow, and Boleslava was quiet for a moment, choosing her next words carefully.
Is there a reason you keep following us around, or are you just lonely?
Clearly, it hadn't been what he had expected, for Blue seemed surprised. He ran a hand through his hair, the other at his side, and occasionally pursed his lips, either feigning deep thought, or perhaps genuinely introspective.
A bit of both, I'd say. I always have a reason for everything I do, of course, it's just very often very unimportant. But you two really do provide the best company. And my current realm is rather empty, at the moment. Though, I'm more than fine with that.
The corners of his lips twitched upwards.
No, I think I'd say at this point, you've already exceeded my expectations. But I wouldn't say I'm really lonely. More like, how fortunate I am to have such kindly strangers to ply me with potatoes.
Well, she couldn't argue with that, not really. This time, all three laughed. Blue rose to his feet and brushed imaginary dust from his trousers. After all, he never quite came to stop on the ground.
Well, I'm afraid that's my cue. Now that I've ascertained that the two of you'll be doing well enough on your own, I suppose I'll see myself out. Though, next time, I wouldn't mind trading stories myself.
Hardly had he finished speaking before he had disappeared within a fractured rhombus of pale light, the lingering glimmers of which Koza stared patiently beyond. It was only when the scent of ozone became almost overwhelming that she gathered Boleslava into her arms and began to walk from the area, taking care not to breathe too deeply as the scent of ozone grew stronger, and the air became thinner and thinner and... Chapter end.